Hi, can you listen to me? Well, I'm going to talk about the day the Venezuelan government crossed a new line and attacks against journalists took on a new dimension in Venezuela. But first, I want to show you two videos. In the first one, you're going to see a journalist recommending the population what to do in case there's no connectivity and there's a media blackout. In the second one, which was edited by the government, you're going to see this journalist. It's trying to make him seem like he's promoting a media blackout and a political unrest.
¿Qué pasa con los blackouts? La primera lección de la primavera árabe es que cuando son aplicados desde el poder ya es tarde. Es decir, cuando los aplicas ya tienes a la gente en otra lógica. Lo segundo es que el efecto inmediato es que la gente sale a la calle. Eso pasa siempre. En el momento en el que tú rompes el tejido, la capacidad que tiene la gente de estar en común con otro, sale a la calle a reconstruir ese tejido. Entonces puede ser peor para ellos. Y lo tercero es que también buena parte de la infraestructura gubernamental depende de esas mismas redes. Y no tienen manera de hacerlo selectivo, de hacerlo discrecional. O sea, bueno, solamente bloqueo pero no me veo afectado yo. La cochinada que han hecho durante los días de protesta es que, por ejemplo, bloquean YouTube, o bloquean Instagram, o bloquean Twitter. ¿Qué hay que hacer en el caso de que de verdad no tengas nada? Salir a la calle a registrar. Es el momento en el que debes tener las memorias limpias, libres y demás, porque te va a tocar grabar videos, hacer fotos, entrevistar gente y ver qué está pasando hasta que vuelva la luz, hasta que vuelva la posibilidad de conectarnos. ¿Qué pasa con la...?
Okay, so this was the edited video. It has the music, actually.
¿Cómo creen que se ejecuta este blackout? ¿Cuánto tiempo estiman que nos dejen incomunicados? ¿Qué nos recomiendan hacer? ¿Cómo creen que debemos informarnos durante ese momento? ¿Qué pasa con los blackouts? La primera lección de la primavera árabe es que cuando son aplicados desde el poder ya es tarde. Es decir, cuando los aplicas ya tienes a la gente en otra lógica. Lo segundo es que el efecto inmediato es que la gente sale a la calle. Eso pasa siempre. ¿Qué hay que hacer en el caso de que de verdad no tengas nada? Salir a la calle a registrar. Es el momento en el que debes tener las memorias limpias, libres y demás, porque te va a tocar grabar videos, hacer fotos, entrevistar gente y ver qué está pasando hasta que vuelva la luz, hasta que vuelva la luz, hasta que vuelva la luz, hasta que vuelva la luz.
And here they just quote Marco Rubio. So this is Luis Carlos Diaz. He's a really prominent Venezuelan journalist. He works with social media. He's a social media expert. And he was detained on March 11 from this year. He was riding his bike to go home while intelligence forces detained him and disappeared him for about 8.5 hours. Nobody knew where he was. Later, he was found and he was taken to state prison. Sounds pretty bad, right? Well, that's not all. All of this happened while the Office of the High Commissioner for the Human Rights of the United Nations was visiting Venezuela. Yes, there were human rights defenders in our country when this happened. So this is something that has been happening a lot in the country, especially since 2019. Here we have some numbers from Instituto Prensa y Sociedad. It's a Venezuelan NGO that registers these types of cases of violations to freedom of expression in Venezuela. So we had, in 2018, there were 266 cases of violations to this right. Only from January to mid-March from 2019, they counted 155 cases. What this NGO found is that this gotten worse while the Office of the High Commissioner of the Human Rights Representative were in the country. So that was like no protections for Venezuelan journalists. It increased their risk. So even though Michelle Bachelet's representatives were in Venezuela, Mr. Maduro lashed against media. So during the first 18 days of March, the NGO registered 50 aggressions against journalists in our country. This only has gotten worse in 2019 with the political crisis. Here are some examples of, international news correspondents that came to cover the political crisis in Venezuela. This is a Polish journalist. He was detained and brutally assaulted by police forces. Caudihuero, He's an American journalist that got deported. And finally, Jorge Ramos from Univision Anchor. He was interviewing Nicolas Maduro in the presidential palace. And his media equipment were confiscated. But this is something us Venezuelan journalists have been dealing with for a long time. This is Armando Info Team. They are an investigative journalism outlet, and they had to abandon the country after they were being sued because of an investigation on corruption. So what it's like to be a journalist in Venezuela, it can be really troublesome, especially if there's a blackout and there's no running water to take a shower. So this is a Venezuelan hospital, all in the shadows because of a blackout. I cover the health editorial area, so that means I have to go to hospitals and report on patients and the lack of access to treatment. I have talked to people that have to cross the border to look for chemotherapy because in my country there's none. I have spoke to a mother who has lost their 2 baby twins of starvation. I have spoke to patients who have lost a loved one because there was no blood to make a transfusion. And also patients that has been waiting for over 6 months to get a surgery. Oh, sorry. So I even have to tell security guards at hospital I'm going to donate blood so they can let me access the healthcare center. This got really difficult. And these authoritarian traits and features from the government do not only affect us journalists, it also affects our sources. People are afraid to speak because they might get blackmailed. So if you talk openly about what's going on here, I'm not going to give you your treatment or you're going to get fired. This is something that has happened to doctors that have openly talked to us about what is going on. This situation gets really worse in a polarized environment like Venezuela's. So what's going on is that authoritarian governments have this script. They tell you, you're either with me or against me. Journalism is anti-power by nature. So we're not in favor of power. We actually criticize it. So automatically we're against. And even if you don't take a side, you're taking a side and you're choosing not to be with them. This picture is about the humanitarian aid that was supposed to enter with the opposition's help on February 23rd from this year. And what's going on right now, it's you can tell people the truth, but in a polarized environment, people are going to believe the truth that adjusts better to what they think or what their vision of reality is. So who burned the humanitarian aid? Maduro's government, a protester. In the end, people are going to believe what they want to believe and what adjusts better to their version of what's going on and their truths. So here's where journalists play a key role. And this polarization is not only seen, in the journalism we perform, but also in social media. This environment is nourished by bots, Twitter. Here's an example. This is a Twitter user that identifies himself as a Maduro supporter. So he's just saying, here's a list of journalists from Venezuela that should resign to their profession. And they just mentioned a bunch of journalists that are critical to the government. And here's a very specific demand. All of the journalists from Efecto Cocuyo, which is an independent news outlet I work for. And this narrative, this hate narrative and polarization narrative is nourished by the government. And I want to show you this video.
Lumeli Reyes, la campeona del arroz con pollo, la reina del arroz con pollo de los fake news. Usted no le gana a nadie. Cuando salgan más verdades, sin que la fábrica del gobierno, de fake news del gobierno, pueda actuar, ahora los mentirosos somos nosotros. Nosotros fuimos los que inventamos que estábamos reclutando niños. Muchos verán la masacre que se ha cometido con los venezolanos. Después no digan que no sabían de las violaciones de derechos humanos, torturas, tratos crueles y asesinatos. La reina del fake news.
Okay. So imagine the second most powerful man in your country had a TV show every Wednesday night that he uses to discredit and attack and put journalists on the spotlight. This is what you just saw. This is Diosdado Cabello, president of the Constituent Assembly of Venezuela. And he was talking about Luz Meli Reyes, my editor and founder of Efecto Cocuyo. He's telling her she is basically the queen of fake news, and she has been attacked several times on social media by actually telling the truth. And what you just saw is something that happens every Wednesday night. Diosdado Cabello has a board, and he puts there pictures and tweets from journalists and critical media outlets, basically to undermine the confidence people have in journalists. So I've talked to you about all of this, but I haven't talked about what is Efecto Cocuyo. My editors have been to ISOJ in previous years, but this is my first time, so I wanted to explain to those who's it's first time as well. Efecto Cocuyo somewhat translates to firefly effect. So basically, it represents a light just one firefly represents a little light. But together, we are a bunch of tiny sparks that can illuminate an entire nation. So Efecto Cocuyo was born back in 2015 in the middle of a severe and critical moment for media, especially traditional media. The government was asphyxiating, and a lot of journalists migrated to digital platforms. So we're an independent news website that decided to tell the truth in such a critical moment for Venezuela. And we are committed to responsible journalism ever since. And right now, the other day, there was this reader who was telling us on Twitter, I never thought Efecto Cocuyo could be a metaphor of what is going on right now in Venezuela. And it actually is. It's a firefly effect. We are currently affected by a severe crisis of basic services. There are constant blackouts, constant outages. Actually, Luis Carlos Diaz, the journalist I presented you at the very beginning, he was accused by the government of Nicolas Maduro of participating in the blackout that left the country without electricity for 4 days. So we are committed to responsible journalism, and more than ever, we are gathering all this information to illuminate what's going on in Venezuela. Thank you.